Okay, so to reset, fortunately, the bill to establish a commission to investigate the riots of January 6th, known colloquially as the Trump riots, passed the House of Representatives yesterday with the vote of Democrats and 35 Republicans. But the path to that vote was very circuitous, and it included a bunch of completely unhinged and off-topic rants and raves from a variety of Republican members of the House, starting with Trumpian radical Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of I Harass AOC for a Living fame. Now, if there is anyone who is incentivized not to have January 6th investigated, it would be Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she is likely a perpetrator, both in ginning people up to want to riot by telling lies about the election for months starting in November of 2020, and also because she had close associates rioting. A guy who called her a great friend and who worked with her on other, quote, issues, participated in the riots. So here is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Listen to this.
As a person that was a victim of the January 6th Capitol attack, I can tell you I'm against the violence that happened that day, but I do not believe a January 6th commission will achieve any resolution, because we have already had our Department of Justice arrest 445 people, with 100 more to be arrested soon. There's also reports of people being held for 23 hours in solitary confinement. That should not be happening. These people haven't even had a court date yet. You see, what's going to happen with the January 6th commission is the media is going to use this to smear Trump supporters and President Trump for the next few years and cover up the damage, the real damage that's happening to the people of this country, which is tearing down our economy, ripping our borders wide open, and hurting this country.
The real damage of the riots was done by Trump supporters. She's acting like it would be unfair, like it wouldn't make sense for the investigation to end up making Trump supporters look bad. The rioters were all Trump supporters. She says, listen, 400 people have already been arrested. 100 more people are going to be arrested. This entire thing is going to be misused to make Trump supporters look bad. Well, the 500 people you just mentioned are Trump supporters. These are sort of the facts, Marjorie. And the facts may lead us to say, hey, hundreds of these Trump supporters were really bad people, or at least they made bad decisions on that day. Then Madison Cawthorn, another Trumpian lunatic, comes to the microphone and says, this entire investigative commission thing, it's all bogus, because my constituents in South Carolina, mind you, not a border state, care mostly about the border. Here is Madison Cawthorn.
Mr. Speaker, according to recent data from my district, the number one concern of my constituents is the Biden border crisis. Let me repeat that. The number one concern of my constituents in North Carolina is the crisis at our southern border over 1,600 miles away.
So there's a lot to talk about there. First, if it's true that his South Carolinian constituents care mostly about the border and not about the riots, it's partially because he and his fellow Republicans and Fox News and Newsmax have convinced people that there is a crisis at the border, when in reality, very little has changed from when Donald Trump was president. And in fact, we now have relatively few kids at the border. Second, whether there is or is not a crisis at the border, and no matter how it ranks for his South Carolinian constituents, you can deal with whatever's going on at the border and have a commission investigate January 6th. Both things can be done. It's not, we shouldn't do this because in South Carolina, in my district, people care about the border. You could do both. Then Republican Congressman Dan Bishop goes into the semantics game where he says this was a riot, it was a mob, but an insurrection. No, no, no.
It was about insurrection. Let me just say this. If it was an insurrection, it was the worst example of an insurrection in the history of mankind. It was a riot. It was a mob. And it was significant. And it was troublesome. But this is not bipartisanship. And I fear that the gentleman from New York may find that he has been played.
Now, this one keeps being repeated. It wasn't really an insurrection because they didn't succeed. First of all, you can still investigate what happened, whether or not you define it as an insurrection or an insurrection attempt. the failures of leadership, the failures of law enforcement, potentially by design of those around Donald Trump. But you can investigate all of that stuff, and it's worthy of investigation whether or not you deem it an insurrection. But remember, just because it didn't succeed doesn't mean it wasn't an insurrection. If you try to bribe someone and they refuse the bribe, you're still able to be charged for bribing someone. So that is just a terrible semantic game that they are playing, and many of them are playing it. Speaking of semantic games, then Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert spoke. Remember, this guy is a former judge, if you can believe that. And I actually don't even know what he's talking about, which is really common with Louis Gohmert. See, I challenge you to figure out what he's talking about.
Look, things have changed a lot since the 9/11 Commission, because back then we did not have a problem on both sides, either side of the aisle, condemning anti-Semitic remarks. Now, one side has a problem doing that. Back then, we didn't have, we had never in the history of Congress had one party commit what is arguably a felony up to 20 years in prison by preventing an ongoing session of Congress, the exact charge, 1512, 18 U.S.C., that is being alleged against people that came in. As a judge, I would have no problem sentencing anybody that broke into the Capitol, anything that committed a crime here. But let's be real, the partisanship has been dramatic. And that's why it's different now than the 9/11 Commission. Let's get back to being bipartisan and not use every tool as a partisan stick to beat Republicans with.
I really want to know what on earth Louis Gohmert is talking about. I just don't understand it. And that's really common with Louis Gohmert, where it's not that you hear one of his arguments and you say, oh, here are the 3 reasons why the argument makes no sense. I just don't even know what he's saying. I don't know what he's talking about. And then lastly, from Republicans for today, new Republican Conference Chair Elise Stefanik, who, remember, recently replaced the canceled Liz Cheney. She somehow ends up talking about Joe Biden destroying the economy in the last 4 months, even though the topic of debate is supposed to be the riots, not the economy, and not Joe Biden.
Thank you. Americans across this country are facing crisis after crisis. Just think, in just over a year ago, in early 2020, our economy was booming, our standing in the world was strong, we had just rebuilt our nation's military, and our communities and families were thriving. Here we are, a little over 1 year later, in just over 100 days, President Biden and Speaker Pelosi have dismantled that foundation, and the American people are paying the price. Americans are suffering.
All lies. I mean, just all provable, demonstrable lies. The military wasn't rebuilt by Trump because it was fine when Donald Trump took over. Trump tells that story of the generals came to me. They said, sir, we're out of bullets. All made up. The military was fine. We were seen as a joke around the world for electing Trump. We are now recovering our reputation globally. But again, none of it has anything to do with the insurrectious riots. And then lastly, overall, making a lot of sense, our friend, Congressman Tim Ryan, Democratic congressman from Ohio, has been a guest on this program. Really good guy. He just had enough of the nonsense and he made that clear.
I want to thank the gentleman from New York and the other Republicans who are supporting this and thank them for their bipartisanship. To the other 90% of our friends on the other side of the aisle, holy cow, incoherence. No idea what you're talking about. Benghazi, you guys chased the former Secretary of State all over the country, spent millions of dollars. We have people scaling the Capitol, hitting the Capitol Police with lead pipes across the head, and we can't get bipartisanship. What else has to happen in this country? Cops. This is a slap in the face to every rank and file cop in the United States. If we're going to take on China, if we're going to rebuild the country, if we're going to reverse climate change, we need 2 political parties in this country that are both living in reality, and you ain't one of them. I yield back the balance.
So listen, at the end of the day, Republicans did what we expected them to do, and they are incentivized to try to shut this thing down because what the Riot Commission might uncover is that they themselves are very much to blame what took place on January 6th. And then at the end of the day, they did pass the bill to start this commission. We will now see what happens in the Senate. Let me know what you think about what is the fundamental reason that Republicans don't want the commission. Is it because they think it will make them look bad? Is it because it will incriminate them? Something else? All of the above? Let me know your thoughts. And remember that if you have been thinking of becoming a David Pakman Show member, Monday, Memorial Day, it's going to be a perfect day. I can feel it. The weather will just be beautiful. We are doing a one-day membership special. We are looking to drop a massive bomb of new memberships, and we are going to offer them at a huge discount. If you want to be notified about how to take advantage of that discount, just get on my newsletter at davidpakman.com. Quick break. Really great program today. We might keep this one. One of our sponsors today is COVID Rescue Fund. COVID Rescue Fund is helping small business owners who have lost their businesses during COVID. There are over 100,000 small businesses that have had to close their doors since the pandemic began. There are many organizations out there helping businesses who are still open to stay afloat, but COVID Rescue Fund is one of the few organizations working to help businesses reopen who have had to close. COVID Rescue Fund crowdsources funds to provide grants up to $100,000 for these owners to create new businesses. I would implore anyone in my audience to help COVID Rescue Fund in their mission by donating at covidrescuefund.org. All money that you give is going to the mission, not to compensating people who work for the organization. The founders of COVID Rescue Fund are big fans of the David Pakman Show. Let's help them bring back as many small businesses as we can. The link is right underneath this video.